All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. This is State of the Braves. I'm George McNair, and I'm back with you guys for another episode, and very thankful to be back, and thankful for you guys who have supported me. I think I mentioned this last time, 300 subscribers now on YouTube, and that just is a really awesome thing, and I'm pushing towards 500. So any of you guys who do like listening, like watching, obviously, the more subscribers I get, the more content I can get out to you guys. If you have friends or family who love the Braves or just generally really like baseball, please share the State of the Braves podcast with them. Man, I would be so thankful, and I already am, for you guys and your support. So definitely just wanted to mention that again. All right, guys, well, let's jump into some league news first. Most of this affects the Braves or impacts the Braves in some way, and then we will talk about how the Braves have been doing against the Cardinals and the Pirates. So some league news, and again, specifically to the Braves first. The Braves' magic number is now down to just 6 games for the NL East championship, as the Braves won today against the Pirates, and the Phillies dropped what was a winnable game. They were leading in Miami fairly late. Miami comes back, and Miami actually has been on a roll and has really put itself in a position to still vie for a wild card spot. So now the Braves are going into Philly early in this week. Monday, they'll be there Monday through Wednesday and play 4 games, as they'll have a doubleheader on Monday tomorrow. And the Braves have a chance to clinch in Philadelphia, and of course, doing that in Philly, in front of Philly fans, would be pretty sweet. We don't have to do it there. The Braves, obviously, with a solid 3+ weeks to go in the regular season, can comfortably be confident that the NL East championship is now theirs. But yeah, it would be pretty sweet to do it in Philly. I know some of you guys recently commented that you would just love for the Phillies to tank hard, the Braves to sweep the last 7 games they have with them, and maybe Philly even to miss the playoffs. I doubt that's going to happen, but it is possible. It's not unheard of if Philly had a big downturn in these last few weeks for them to miss the playoffs, because they have some good teams playing pretty well just behind them. And Philly hasn't really been playing and hitting on all cylinders as of late. Some other news: it looks likely that Kyle Wright may return a bit sooner than expected. If you watch the broadcast today, Wright was on the bench in a Braves uniform. Nothing has been announced yet, not that I have heard, but the Braves might call on him early. They have the second game of the doubleheader on Monday. They have not announced the starter yet, and just simply needing that spot filled might mean that Kyle Wright comes up. I would expect that he would be on a pretty strict pitch count. I don't think he's pitched over 60 pitches in any of his starts in his rehab assignments so far. So he might have a short hook, but nonetheless, we might end up seeing Kyle Wright a little shorter or a little earlier than expected. Another thing that impacts this is Spencer Strider apparently is sick. I kind of wonder if he got what Austin Riley had. I hope not, but looks like he will be pushed back a day or two. He is scheduled to pitch in the last game of the series with Philly. All right, some other news. This is Braves adjacent, as I think anything that's happening with the Dodgers somewhat affects the Braves. Walker Buehler was shut down for the season by the Dodgers, and they put out a statement basically saying he hasn't re-injured anything, but this is in order to save him for 2024. So interesting decision on their end. Of course, Buehler's coming off of Tommy John surgery. He has been in AAA rehabbing, looked pretty good, but they've decided to shut him down. And their pitching staff is, by the day, looking thinner and thinner for the postseason. Off the IL recently, Clayton Kershaw was throwing 88-mile-an-hour fastballs. This is the slowest his fastball has been clocked in his entire career. And, of course, Kershaw is not a super young guy. So you wonder if he's healthy, if he might have to go back on the IL, or this is just what he's going to be for the rest of the season. And, guys, I just generally think the Dodgers don't do a great job of managing pitchers for the long season. And Some of that is how they utilize their pitchers. And then, and some of it's just the proof's in the pudding. I mean, the one championship that the Dodgers won through all of this, all of these really good Dodgers teams was the year in which they had a shortened season. And, I think that really benefited them and kind of covered up some of those flaws. But you see, I mean, the Braves certainly experienced that in 2021. The Dodgers pitching staff was greatly weakened by the end, and the Braves took full advantage of that. And certainly, you saw that in last year's loss to the Padres as well for the Dodgers. So here it's rearing its ugly head again for the Dodgers. It's not guaranteeing that they can't make a run in the postseason, or that they're not a very dangerous team. They still have a great offense with two of the best players in baseball. Mookie Betts also did leave a game recently on crutches, fouled a ball off his foot, but I don't think that's anything long term. But their pitching staff, at the very least, is not looking super strong right now. So it's something to at least be aware of, and you wonder if the Dodgers maybe are a little more in danger of getting bounced early in the playoffs. That is to be seen, but something to be aware of. All right, in a bit more Braves news, Matt Olson is the Braves nominee for the Roberto Clemente Award for his work to promote help with those with autism. There was a really cool Bally Sports feature on Matt Olson and his dedication to this. He has a very close personal connection to autism, so that was cool. I definitely encourage you guys to check that out. If you don't know what the Roberto Clemente Award is, it is at least partially on a fan vote, but it is meant to promote character, community involvement, philanthropy, and positive contributions on and off the field. So those who are nominated, each team gets a nominee, and you can also vote online for it. So I would encourage you to vote for Matt on that one. It really makes me, when I watch this Bally special feature on Matt Olson, it made me like Matt a lot more. Of course, us Braves fans have been getting to know him over the last 2 seasons. And I think he's such a laid-back guy. It kind of almost, because you don't see his emotion on the field, it's almost a little harder to connect with him and get a read on him and what he's thinking and all that stuff. So to see this type of feature on Matt Olson and to hear him and his connection to this really good cause was pretty cool. It's encouraging to know that he's committed to this stuff off the field. And of course, he's had a tremendous season on the field too. So really good stuff from Matt Olson. All right, guys, well, let's go ahead and get into these games that the Braves have recently played against the Cardinals and the Pirates. You go into these games and you really are expecting the Braves to take care of business against some lesser opponents. I mean, on paper, you're thinking, gosh, 6 games total against the Cardinals and Pirates. We ought to win 5 out of 6 of those games or that sort of thing. And, of course, it didn't exactly happen that way. The Braves dropped the first 2 against the Cardinals in pretty embarrassing fashion. Then, of course, they're able to win the last game of that series. But then the Pirates series was kind of hard to squeak by with winning 2 out of 3 in that one as well. So you come away 3-3. That doesn't seem incredibly impressive. I do think there are a couple reasons for this, not excuses, but reasons. I mean, the number one thing is the reality of coming off of that long West Coast road trip, which was a huge success. Remember, the Braves went 8-2 on that road trip. They went 3 out of 4 against the Dodgers. They come home, and the reality of, just the emotional letdown of that trip, but also jet lag. I mean, these guys are humans, so, time zone adjustments. If you've ever traveled out west and come back, or travel to Europe, come back, I mean, the body does not snap back immediately. You probably have bad sleep for a number of days. You're going to be tired. You're going to be drained. And it did seem like the first 2 games against the Cardinals, the Braves were just kind of walking in quicksand or something like that. So I think that was a real thing. You also had a couple guys get sick. Of course, Austin Riley has missed 2 games, and now news comes out that Spencer Strider might be battling something. So hopefully the Braves can just get through some of this stuff and get back to it. They're not going to have another long West Coast trip to have to make for the rest of the season. So that's good news right there. I think the other thing that's going on over this little stretch of games is the fact that Snitker, he is not pitching his regular dudes in a lot of these games. Snitker is building in extra days off for his 4 primary starters. So, you've seen Soroka make a start. You've seen Winans make a start. Dylan Dodd make a start. And these are guys that are not going to be making postseason starts for you. And you're honestly not necessarily having real high expectations of them when they make a start, even though Winans made a good one today. But this is Snitker playing the long game in a lot of ways, even though it's not really fun to watch necessarily in the short term. He is trying to build out as much rest as he can for his primary starters. And also, guys, the Braves have this big 4-game set against Philly, which includes a doubleheader. And so I really think not only for his starting staff, but for his bullpen as a whole, he wants to go into that series as rested as possible. And quite honestly, I think he did a good job of that. You would love for the Braves to have at least gotten one more win against the Cardinals. I mean, I think that it was in hand in that second game a little bit more, and they just couldn't pull it out. But anyways, I think when you have some frustration at how Snitker played this and how the starters, were chosen for these 2 series, that's the honest answer. Several of these losses should not be overanalyzed. Games lost when Soroka's pitching, when Dylan Dodd is pitching, should be viewed with the correct perspective, and that's simply those guys. Well, of course, Soroka, now that he's hurt, but Dylan Dodd is not getting a postseason start. And so, he gives up runs. The Braves throw some of their lesser guys out of the bullpen. They drop that game. It stinks. You want to win every game, but it's not telling you anything about there's some weakness popping up for the Braves that might come back to bite them in the postseason. No, not true. They're just trying to set themselves up as best as possible for the postseason right now. I think probably the one issue in these games that should be paid a little more attention to is Spencer Strider, and his blow-up games. It's no secret now that Strider's had about 5 or 6 games this season in which not only does he not have his best stuff, but he gets kind of destroyed. And this is, ironically, it's happened against bad teams. So I talked about this last episode a little bit, so I don't want to belabor it, and I've mentioned it in the past, but it's just a fact that his mechanics and release point are so important to his fastball command. And when he's sitting 97 and he's not getting that nice rise from his fastball, it suddenly becomes hittable. You're going to have hitters who are sitting on his fastball already, but it's a little more of a hittable pitch, and he's really not getting away with it a lot when that happens. When he's at 99 and the ball's rising and it is unhittable, obviously he's going to blow away a lot of guys. And that affects his slider in really positive ways too when he's on. But as of right now, when he's not on, he's getting hit. And the main thing I would say is I really hope he can figure out a way to find a middle ground when he doesn't have his best stuff. Can he be effective enough to not just let the game totally get away from him? And in the postseason, that's what he has to do. I mean, if he shows up in a postseason game and he doesn't have his best stuff, he's got to figure out a way to get through 5 or 6 innings and give up 3 runs instead of 5 or 6 runs. We saw Fried do that in the last game against the Cardinals. It's one reason why Fried is an ace. And while Strider is one of the most talented pitchers in all of baseball, he hasn't quite figured out how to do that yet. It's kind of that double-edged sword. He's so talented. He's so uniquely gifted with that fastball that I think some of the growth that maybe would typically happen in the minor leagues hasn't happened yet, right? At the big league level, he's still trying to figure out how to grow as a pitcher in these ways. And I'm not worried. I mean, look, the fact is, most great pitchers, it really is year 3 or 4 until they really have figured it out completely. And I do think Strider is going to do that. He even mentioned recently in right after that game that he struggled in, He was talking about the fact that it's difficult in season to make big adjustments. You can't fool with your mechanics or release point or anything too much. You can't add a pitch mid-season and it just work. And so he's kind of working with what he's got right now and doing smaller tweaks. And there's a lot of truth to that. So hopefully those small tweaks can bring him back to really effective pitching. And we know when he is on, guys, you would like no one else on the mound than Spencer Strider. So let's hope that happens. All right, the other thing I want to mention is since the LA series, Ronald Acuna, the beauty of Ronald Acuna's game has been on full display. You had about a week of everybody talking about Mookie Betts, and to his credit, he had a tremendous August. But since the Braves traveled to LA, it's been all Ronald Acuna. I mean, those saying Ronald, it's kind of funny. Mid-season, I heard a lot of this. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but a lot of people complaining that Ronald Acuna is not hitting enough home runs. He needs to adjust because he doesn't have a high enough launch angle. That stuff to me is ridiculous. Yeah, Ronald hits a lot more low line drives than most hitters, but Ronald just hits more line drives than anyone else, right? He hits the ball harder, more consistently than anybody else in the game, and it is more of a low line drive swing. But guess what? The guy's hitting 335, and the guy can steal 60-plus bases, and it's not just about the home run. And yet he's still sitting here with 35 home runs on the season. This guy's a unique player. 95% of the players on earth, if they're hitting the ball at this low trajectory that Ronald does, you might want to change something. You don't want to change one thing about Ronald Acuna's swing. If he played this way and hit this way for the rest of his career, he is not only a Hall of Famer, but he is top tier Hall of Famer. So I certainly hope that he can continue to be as successful as he's been and as healthy as he's been this season. And man, it has just been a pleasure to watch him, hitting line drive home runs. When he's hitting it off of a fastball, it's, that 16-degree, 19-degree launch angle. No one else in baseball can do that and hit the ball 450 feet. And then, he hit a curveball against Adam Wainwright that was almost in the dirt away, and he hits it the opposite field, right center field. Wainwright was like confused. Oh, how could he possibly do that? Ronald Acuna can just do things that other people cannot. He is a generational talent, absolutely. And he just hits the ball hard everywhere constantly. Ronald, change nothing. Your launch angle is perfectly fine. Over the last 10 games, Ronald has 15 hits, 6 home runs, and 34 total bases. So that begins with that first game in LA after he got married. Congratulations, Ronald, on that, by the way. Getting married in LA, pretty cool. But 10 games, 34 total bases, and there were 2 hitless games in the middle of that. So just awesome stuff from Ronald, and I hope he just stays this hot all the way through and puts the MVP to bed, that whole discussion to bed, because he's just been just next level unbelievable this season. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into each of these games since I was with you guys last. We talked about the first 2 games of the St. Louis series last time. So let's jump into game 3. St. Louis, the Braves do salvage the last game of that series and win it 8-5. This is a game in which Max Fried made the start. And it was a grinded out type of start from Fried, that kind of start you would love to see from Spencer Strider when he doesn't have his stuff. Fried, 6 innings pitched, 3 earned runs, 6 hits, 2 walks. Again, wasn't his sharp self, wasn't spotting his slider real well, his fastball, but kind of just made it work. And, Fried is able to do this and has learned how to do it over time. And I did want to ask the question, just how is he able to do this most of the time when he doesn't have his good stuff? And I think it's 2 primary things. Number one, Fried rarely misses in the middle of the zone. A lot of his misses, if he's not sharp, he's inside or outside, but he's not leaving a lot of balls right over the middle of the plate. So that's number one. Number 2, Fried has 3 effective off-speed pitches. And honestly, when Fried goes out there, it's rare that he has everything working. When he has everything working, you're just not going to hit the guy. But a lot of times there might be one of his off-speed pitches not working. And when he's struggling a little bit more, like this game, you might have 2 pitches not working. But he almost always has one of his off-speed pitches working that he can use off of his fastball. And I think this is really beneficial. And obviously Strider doesn't have that right now. He has a changeup that he throws just 2 or 3 times a game, but it's really fastball slider. And so if one of those isn't working, he's kind of at a loss. So maybe that's one thing that Strider will do over the offseason is try to add a pitch, or maybe just work more and more on that changeup to where he can throw it more consistently. So anyways, Fried is able to get through this game. Wainwright was on the other side of things. He made his last start in his home state of Georgia. If you guys know Adam Wainwright, 42 years old, has had a great career. He's at 198 career wins. He's probably only got about 4 more starts left. I hope for him because he's just a super likable guy. I hope he gets his 200th win. It's kind of unlikely because he's just pitched pretty poorly this year, and you can tell when he's on the mound. His fastball is only at about 85 now, so he's really just trying to figure things out. And luckily for the Braves in this one, they figured him out instead. He gave up 4 home runs, which he hasn't allowed 2 home runs in the game since 2021. So the Braves really got to him, and Braves fans, of course, we're used to us hitting a lot of home runs against pretty much every pitcher. But they definitely got to Wainwright in this one, and it started with a home run. Acuna, laser shot from Acuna on a first pitch of the game by Wainwright. This is the home run that was hit at a 16-degree launch angle. Just unbelievable laser shot from Ronald Acuna. Now, after that, the Braves scored 3 in the first inning. Eddie Rosario also had a 2-run single. But after that, Wainwright seemed to settle in for a little while. Not much from the Braves until the 5th inning. So you get a solo shot from Matt Olson, and then Harris hits a home run in the 6th, and that was a really impressive one off of a curveball that he went down and got and just absolutely annihilated. And then Acuna steps up again, guys, and goes to right center field. This is the one I mentioned earlier, curveball down and away, and that beautiful swing. He just goes the other way with it and launches it into the bullpen. So it was all about Ronald on this night. d'Arnaud also got into the act, not off of Wainwright, but it was nice to see him get a home run. And the weirdest thing about this series against the Cardinals is while the Braves were just crushing home runs, they almost all were solo home runs until finally d'Arnaud steps up and hits a 2-run homer. And this one, it puts the Braves up for good. And finally, something good for d'Arnaud. He's kind of low-key. You appreciate his leadership and everything he brings to the clubhouse. But d'Arnaud has low-key had a pretty down offensive season. He's hitting about 240. This was his 11th home run, so his power's still showing up. And, I'm not blaming the guy. He's playing fewer games than he has the last several years. Obviously not consistent at bats, so I have no doubt that is a big reason why. And, of course, he's getting a little older too. But I would love to see him maybe get a few more consistent days as we get down the stretch and maybe get a little more comfortable at the plate. So obviously love d'Arnaud. I love when he is in the mix with some of the good things the Braves are doing. So it was good to see him get a 2-run shot in this one. And it was an important home run to put the Braves up and give them a little cushion late in that game. All right, so the Braves take that one from the Cardinals, and then Pittsburgh comes to town. And I will tell you something. I'm gonna give the Pittsburgh Pirates, an award for the most annoying opponent of 2023. Okay, the Pirates, when the Braves went to Pittsburgh, the Pirates played them incredibly tough. I think the Braves ended up splitting that series 2 games apiece, but they had to just do everything in their power to just get 2 games from Pittsburgh. It's like suddenly in that series, Pittsburgh had an all-time great offense. I mean, you know, they just would not lay down and die in that series. And then in this series, even though the Braves end up winning the series 2-1, man, game 3, if you guys watched today, the amount of line drive outs by the Braves was remarkable. I mean, it got comical to the point where even the Pirates were laughing at it. I mean, just line drive after line drive that was not finding a hole. And thankfully, the Braves still end up winning this game. But if you look at, you know, the probably expected batting average in this game, I'm sure it's really, really high with the amount of line shots the Braves were putting out there against the Pirates. But anyways, let's go into this series a little bit. Game 1 was a victory. It was 8-2. In this one, the Braves get a really high quality start from Bryce Elder in this one. He earned his 12th win of the season. He goes 7 innings, just gives up 2 runs, 4 hits, and 9 strikeouts, which was really, really high for Elder. Tells you his stuff was really working and moving a lot. The only 2 runs he gave up were was on 1 home run late, and you know, it's kind of didn't really matter that much anyways. So great outing from Elder. And then Ronald Acuna shows up once again, hits his 35th home run of the season. And as he hit that one, I really started thinking, okay, 40 is now possible. You know, a lot of talk about Ronald maybe getting to 40 home runs, you know, the 40-40 club, and he'd actually be 40-60 or maybe even 40-70 in stolen bases if he can get there. So, you know, look, I mean, he doesn't have to get there. He himself has said he's not focused on it. You can tell that by the types of at-bats that he's having, but it would be just another feather in his cap and an awesome thing for him. I really hope he gets there. Eddie Rosario also went deep in this game, and the Braves, they didn't have a ton of runners on base in this one, but they go 5 for 10 with runners in scoring position. And just wanted to mention Eddie Rosario has been really good in the second half, and especially over his last 30 games. Eddie is hitting .327 with a near .400 on base percentage and a .554 slugging percentage over his last 30 games. So Eddie and, of course, Ozuna, Michael Harris, all these guys have just continued to make the Atlanta lineup so deep, and just wanted to give a shout out to Eddie Rosario. Hopefully he also continues to hit well as we go into the postseason. We know what he's capable of doing in the postseason. All right, game 2 against the Pirates was unfortunately an 8-4 loss. The Braves celebrated Andruw Jones at the beginning of this one as he got his number retired. Just wanted to spend another minute or two on Andruw. So number 25 now hangs up there between Warren Spahn and John Smoltz. And that's just really cool to actually see that number up there. Looked like Andruw got maybe a little choked up when they actually unveiled that number. And just to consider him one of the all-time greats in Atlanta Braves history is just really cool stuff. It was also really awesome to hear Andruw in an extended visit to the booth. He was in the booth for 2.5 innings. And, you know, I've heard him in interviews, but it's kind of different when he sits down with Frank Gore, who's one of his buddies, and he loosens up a little bit, and you get a better feel for the guy. I mean, here I am, you know, I watched Andrew's entire career, and this is probably the most I've ever heard him talk in one sitting, and you do feel like you get to know the guy a lot more. Just funny guy, clearly is loved and respected by all of his teammates. And, you know, as he was talking, he kind of reminded you of his experience coming up from Curacao, 19-year-old kid who suddenly makes the Braves midseason, and here he is on a World Series defending team in 1996, surrounded by all these veteran guys, and just the difficult challenge that would be, and how much was put on him, and how much he really stepped up to the plate. And of course, you know, hitting those 2 home runs in the 1996 World Series is so memorable. But also how in 97 and 98 he slides into the center field role and just wins 10 straight Gold Gloves and is remarkable in that role for so many years. another thing I learned when he was in the broadcast booth, and they had Terry Pendleton in there for a little bit as well, was the role that Terry Pendleton played as the Braves hitting coach when Andruw Jones hit his 51 home runs in, I think that was '05. Andruw, of course, finished second in MVP voting that year. That was the last of the Braves' 14 straight division titles. Andruw had a ton to do with that, obviously, in that season. And it's pretty cool to see and know the impact that Terry Pendleton had, as they had a lot of, they worked a lot in the offseason, revamped Andrew's swing. And it's just great to hear that. And it reminds me, too, that this is what makes the Braves organization a little different. The generational legacy, it's passed down from one group of players to the next. Many of them stay, like Terry Pendleton, like now Chipper Jones and Andruw Jones, staying, passing on knowledge, passing the torch in a lot of ways. And it is very meaningful. And you saw that with Andrew's 51 home runs and Terry Pendleton, taking part in that. You see it with Chipper Jones today and the impact he has on Austin Riley and those guys. And I hope it continues for many years to come. But the other thing that they talked about in that booth was something I was pretty interested in. Andrew's kind of downturn in the second half of his career. So Andruw spent his first 12 seasons as an Atlanta Brave, and the Braves chose not to bring him back as a free agent. Andruw was clearly declining a little bit by then. He only hit .222 in his last season as a Brave, slowing down a little bit in center field as well. And he was going to be an expensive free agent, of course, based off of what he'd done. So Schuerholz decided not to bring him back. And Andruw shared in the booth last night how hurt and disappointed he was by that. And then he went out to LA for the Dodgers and struggled. I mean, mightily struggled, to the point where even at that point you thought he might be done. He was able to bounce back a little bit in later years and serve more as an occasional outfielder in DH, and hit quite a few more home runs in those last several years. He was never quite the same player after he left Atlanta. But anyways, Andruw sharing that, and it just came across as very true, how disappointed he was. He wanted to be a Brave his entire career. And, he also paid a lot of honor and respect to Bobby Cox. And I really wonder if Andruw had stayed a Brave for longer, played under Bobby Cox for longer, would he have been able to have played at a higher level for longer? And, the biggest impact of that is right now, I still think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. They talked a lot about that last night. I do think he's going to make the Hall of Fame, but, he's kind of maybe a little fringier in terms of Hall of Fame. And I just wonder if he had stayed a Brave under Bobby Cox, under this great organization that we know the Braves are, if maybe that would have showed a little bit more on the field, and he would have waltzed into the Hall of Fame instead of waiting for a 7th, 8th, 9th year of voting. So, that's what it made me think about. But I'm really happy, despite the fact that, he went and played for several other teams near the end of his career. I'm so glad that the Braves, as soon as he retired, they embraced Andruw Jones back. And he's kind of one of their biggest fans now. He's at a lot of games. And of course, this is the ultimate honor for him as a Brave to have his number retired, and well deserved. So in this game, I'm not going to dive too deeply in this one, but Dylan Dodd got the spot start. The Braves have just not seen a lot from Dodd. This is obviously just next man up. It's not that, Dodd's been maybe a little better in AAA recently, but I don't know that he's shown too much improvement. He was throwing a little harder in this one, which I think he probably felt like this might be his last start of the season, and maybe even his last start as a Brave, depending on what happens in the offseason. So the effort was there, but the results ultimately were not. He ends up leaving after about 4 innings. The Braves are down early in this one, and just not a lot going on offensively in this one either. Matt Olson does hit his 48th home run, which is his 5th home run in the last 6 games. So guys, Olsen has really just found his stroke once again after a little bit of a lull there. And just really impressive stuff from him. But anyways, the Braves do drop game 2. Now, game 3 today, the Braves win this one 5-2. And it was kind of a weird game, a most unlikely pitcher's duel between Alan Winans and the Pirates pitcher Ortiz. Ortiz came into this one with a 5 ERA and a 300 opponent's batting average. So you're feeling pretty good about this one. And anyway, I'll get to him in a second. But Winans did really well, pitched 6 1/3 innings, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. It's just a great spot start from Winans. He's had one particularly bad game, but he's had several really good ones for the Braves, and this was another good one. But yeah, just ridiculously bad hitting luck for the Braves off of Ortiz. This is the game where I was just mentioning earlier, just line drive after line drive, and that's kind of all that was happening for 6 innings. And his pitch count was ridiculously low too, because the Braves would come up first or second pitch, smoke a ball, but it would be, right at the shortstop, right at the second baseman, right at the third baseman, and quick outs. And so, anyways, they they finally got Ortiz out of the game. They never really got to him, but Ronald comes up again, comes up big again. Line drive off the wall in the 7th inning, finally puts the Braves up for good, puts them up 3-2, and then Olsen comes up later in the inning, base hit. 2 more runs scored. Olsen now has 122 RBIs to go along with his 48 home runs. Both are tops in all of baseball. So, guys, thankfully the Braves don't drop 2 straight series, despite some weird pitching matchups throughout these 2 series. And now they move on to a big 4-game series against the Phillies. And you know that Philadelphia is going to be rocking. Citizens Bank Ballpark is going to be, man, I don't know if I'd want to sit in that ballpark as a Braves fan. You'd have to be pretty brave to go do that, but it will definitely be a playoff atmosphere. I think these types of series are great for the Braves to experience in September. Kind of gets your juices flowing and gets you prepped and ready just mentally for what is coming in September. It's just different, right? It's totally different than games in late August. September rolls around, and Philly needs these games. They're 4-6 in their last 10 games. They have several teams breathing down their neck. It matters in terms of, their seeding in the playoffs, but it is not a guarantee that they'll even make the playoffs at this point. So they need to win. And the Braves, it would be really sweet if the Braves could affect their postseason hopes in a negative way. Philly, 4-6 over their last 10. They're scoring 5 runs per game over that stretch. So they're definitely scoring runs, but they've given up 5.4 runs per game. Had several bad blow-up games lately. Now the Braves are 6-4 in their last 10, as we know. I already mentioned, dropped a couple games to the Cardinals that weren't particularly pleasant, but we also know the reasons for that. The Braves, the offense is not the problem at all. As usual, they're scoring 5.6 runs per game in their last 10, while they've given up 5.3. So the Braves have, and I will give Snitker a lot of credit for this, in the bigger series lately, Snitker has really set up the pitching staff nicely to have the Braves' best pitchers go against the best teams, and that is true in this one. So Monday, game 1, that pitching matchup is Charlie Morton versus T1 Walker. Walker is 5-15 on the year, but he has an ERA of 4.15, so obviously getting a lot of run support. And he's been a little worse than that over his last several starts, 4.50 ERA over his last 7 starts. Game 2 on Monday, this is the one that we might see Kyle Wright in this one against Michael Lorenzen. Of course, Lorenzen threw that no-hitter not too far back, but he actually has not been very good since then. In his last start, he gave up 6 earned runs against San Diego. Game 3 is Max Fried versus Zach Wheeler. This is clearly the best pitching matchup of the series. Wheeler is maybe a little bit of a dark horse for the Cy Young. And, of course, Fried is the Braves' number one pitcher, right? Cy Young, or well, he should. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. It's kind of a lower bar this year for whatever reason for the National League Cy Young Award, and of course Strider probably with his most recent blow up probably loses out on vying for the Cy Young. But I also thought about Max Fried. If he just has a normal season, which a normal season for Max Fried is a 2.5 ERA and just being really, really good. And if he just had that season and not gone through his arm issues, he probably wins the Cy Young this year. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Hopefully he can have a great September and October, and the Braves just win another World Series, and we'll be happy with that. Game 4 in this series on Wednesday. This is where Strider is going to come back, hopefully bounce back from his recent bad start against Christopher Sanchez, who the Braves have not seen yet. Sanchez is a 26-year-old left-hander. He's made 15 starts now for the Phillies and has pitched pretty well, 3.26 ERA. So the Braves do tend to hit lefties pretty well, so we'll see how that one goes. Guys, ultimately, if the Braves win 3 out of 4 games in this series against Philadelphia, they will clinch, and they will clinch in front of Phillies fans. And I think they're going to do it. I think they'll take 3 out of 4 here. And at that point, kind of the calendar and what the Braves are doing gets really interesting, as they'll continue to watch the Dodgers as well, you know, vie for that best record in the National League and in baseball. And then once that is accomplished, hopefully it's accomplished. Once that's accomplished, we'll see how Snitker deals with rest versus making sure that no rust emerges for the Braves and their players going into the playoffs. All right, guys. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I really appreciate, once again, you listening to State of the Braves, and I will talk to you very soon.